Coming up on this episode, creating a blame pie for the Warriors' shocking collapse against the Sacramento Kings on Tuesday night, with the 124-123 defeat seeing them eliminated from the in-season tournament. Yes, welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast. We're about 18 hours removed from, I don't even know how you want to describe that game between the Warriors and the Kings on Tuesday night. I'm just reading here. This was 3 hours ago from someone on Twitter. That might be the worst loss I've ever seen, bro. I'm still not over it. To which someone replied, bottom 4 regular season game in the last 10 years. The Charlotte blow-up in 2021. Green, KD won, and the Grizzlies lost in January 2017 are the other 3 bad ones. I don't know really where to start. That was appalling. I kind of have a saying in life when life throws you some misfortune. It's really if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And that's kind of what I try and believe in when there's a bit of misfortune that happens to me, particularly when it's not overly serious. You know, I've been through enough stuff to realize that a game of basketball doesn't mean too much in the whole context of life, but still we, take a lot into it, obviously. And I just sat there at the end of yesterday's game, just smiling and almost laughing at the TV at what I'd seen across the second half, and particularly in the final minute. It was an all-time epic collapse, disastrous, and there needs to be some accountability here for what happened, because there's a lot of positives in the first half, and I'll get to that, but it's difficult to go back to the first half after what you've just seen in the second half. Building a 24-point lead, it was all great, and then to collapse in the way they did, I don't think anyone really cared about the in-season tournament too much. Obviously, the Warriors needed to win by 12 points to overtake the Kings in first place and advance to the quarterfinals. By the fourth quarter, I don't think anyone actually cared. And from a Warriors perspective, now I'm sure they did from a Sacramento perspective, but for Golden State, with where they are 8-9 on the season heading into that game, they just wanted a win. We just wanted a victory. And to not only get into a situation where they should have comfortably made the quarterfinals of the in-season tournament, to not do that, but then also lose the game in the final minute, it just adds insult to injury, really. And now you're 8-10 on the season and in a real hole. So obviously in the aftermath, I've been trying to figure out, okay, who's to most blame for this epic collapse? And the unfortunate matter is that it starts at the top. It starts with the coach. It starts with the best players on this team, the veteran core. So I've kind of formulated a bit of a blame pie here, with some ingredients on to who to blame for the meltdown that saw a 24-point lead evaporate into a 1-point loss at the end. So I want to start with Steve Kerr. So I've got 50% of my ingredients as Steve Kerr. I see a lot of hate for Steve Kerr on social media. A lot of it goes way too far. A lot of it I think is unwarranted. And I've been fairly late to the party in thinking that a change might need to happen here. And I'm still not in that camp just yet. I've often thought that people that are clamoring to fire Steve Kerr or think that a change needs to be made, I often think it's social media, it's Twitter, it's overreaction that happens after every single game. Not take it too seriously, obviously. But after this one, I'm starting to come around. Wherever I am on the pendulum of fire Kerr or loving Kerr and wanting him to be around for the next decade, I'm starting to come over to the side of, okay, maybe something needs to happen here. Because what I saw in the fourth quarter was a disgrace, really. And there's one principle that any coach should really live by in any team sport, and that is rewarding good performance. And so how Steve Kerr has treated Moses Moody this season, and particularly in the final period yesterday, is shocking, abysmal, and it needs to be addressed. And there is a huge disconnect with what Steve is saying publicly about Moses. I mean, oh, we love Moses. He stays ready. He was excellent. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Because what you're saying is not followed up by your actions in what playing time you're giving to Moses Moody on the floor. And that fourth quarter yesterday was a whole encapsulation of the dynamic between Steve Kerr and Moses Moody, between Steve Kerr and the veteran core. So, for those that didn't watch the game, Moody was out of the rotation, which is another question altogether, another bizarre situation altogether. He was out of the rotation at the start of the game. I mean, we could argue about that till the cows come home. We could, but I'm going to leave it for the moment. He gets a reprieve because Chris Paul and Gary Payton II get injured, and Paul especially is out after the first quarter. Doesn't have a great game until the fourth quarter, where all of a sudden he heats up and probably has the best 3, 4, 5 minute stretch of his entire career. 11 points in the fourth quarter. He has a baseline dunk from a reckless closeout from Malik Monk. Goes up, vicious two-hand slam. That was nice. He takes advantage of Steph getting double teamed because in the second half, Mike Brown did what he's done over the last few games where Steph heats up in the first half and he says, I've had enough. Doubles, traps Steph every time he gets the ball basically and says, I'm going to make other players beat me. And Moses was the one that was going to do that in the fourth quarter. There's a play where Steph gets double teamed. Moses is wide open left corner. Nails the three. Then he has kind of late shot clock, gets given the ball, makes something happen off the dribble. Tough step back three over Sasha Vezenkov, who's 6'9". Tough basket. Big basket at that point of the game. About 5 minutes to go. And then the following possession, Vezenkov goes and makes a three over Moody. The next possession. And then on the next possession down, Moody makes another left wing three over Vezenkov. It turned into the Moses Moody versus Sasha Vezenkov show for a few possessions there, which is what everyone was expecting late in the fourth quarter of an in-season tournament game where, quarterfinal action is on the line. Quite hilarious. But at that point, Moody was as hot as we've ever seen him as a shooter throughout his NBA career. And so it's only appropriate in that situation that Steve Kerr takes him off the floor less than 30 seconds after that final three. Brings back Andrew Wiggins, which, you know what, is the right call. Bring Andrew Wiggins back into the game at that point as the primary defender on De'Aaron Fox. Wiggins finished with 29 points and 10 rebounds. It was arguably his best game of the season. Easily, obviously, top two along with that Thunder game a couple of weeks ago. It was really good. Needed to bring Andrew Wiggins back in. It should not have been for Moses Moody. So for some reason, Steve, who loves to go small to win games, decided to go big. So Chris Paul is out, obviously, and he goes to his traditional starting five: Steph, Clay, Wiggs, Dre, Loon. There's no reason why Kevon Looney should have been in that game over Moses Moody. Now, the one reason that Steve will give is that, and I guess the question mark is, should have it been Moses over Clay? I don't believe so. I think it should have been Looney. Here's why. The reason that Steve will give as to why Loon should have been out there is because he was doing, again, as he has done over the last countless many matchups, he was doing a great job on Domantas Sabonis. All-star big for the Kings, finished with 9 points on 2 of 7 shooting. Loon did an absolutely incredible job. It's not a Looney thing. It's the fact that you were not going to get hurt in that situation by having Moody in over Looney. For starters, the Kings actually got some offensive rebounds in those last few minutes. So if it was about rebounding purposes, well, that didn't help at all, having Looney in there. The second thing is, okay, so you take Looney off, you slide Draymond to the 5 against Sabonis. What Warrior fans are going to have an issue with that? Draymond is going to be more than capable of holding his own against Sabonis. And you know what? If he isn't, and the Kings actually want to run their offense through Sabonis and think we've got a mismatch here or some kind of advantage, which they don't, but if they did think that, actually daring them to running their offense through Sabonis would have actually been a very good risk for Golden State to take. In fact, probably wouldn't have been a risk. You're asking me, would I prefer the ball in De'Aaron Fox or Malik Monk's hands, or would I prefer it in Domantas Sabonis late in the game when he's had 9 points on 7 shots? Even with Loon not there, give the damn ball to Sabonis every single time. Get the ball out of Fox and Monk's hands. That would have been a great result for the Warriors. And so, I just don't see why Looney had to be out there. Because again, if that dares the Kings into using Sabonis more, great. He's had a crap game. Let him go to work. Takes the ball away from Fox and Monk, who ultimately were the ones that won the game for the Kings down the stretch. I thought not playing Moody in those last 4 minutes it's one of the worst coaching decisions I've seen in a while. And I've watched 99% of Warrior games for the last few years or whatever else. I can't remember a time where I was so angry about a lineup decision and so frustrated about a lineup decision. And I don't think I'm alone on that. Now, would the Warriors have won the game if Moody was in? Maybe, maybe not. They still might have lost. The Steph Dre turnovers at the end probably still happen. Monk maybe still hits his shots. Whatever. They might still lose the game. But out of principle alone of rewarding good performance, that philosophy, Moses Moody should have been in the game and had the opportunity to close. He simply should have. Because that is coaching 101. You reward players for playing well. Moses Moody at that point was the hottest he might have ever been in his career. 3 threes, a baseline dunk in the space of 5-6 minutes, whatever. And you take him off the floor. Just made very little to zero sense. And so not only that, you've got the mismanaging of the timeouts, the decision to challenge the Curry offensive foul call, which to me is, again, an encapsulation of the trust that Steve has in his veteran core. And Steph would have no doubt thought, okay, yeah, I've been fouled there. It's not actually an offensive foul. It should be the other way around. And Steve's taken his word for it. And so, yes, Steph should have some responsibility in that as well. But that is just a whole, as I said, encapsulation of Steve's trust in the veteran core. And right now what we're seeing is that core, Steph, Clay, Dre, Wiggs even to an extent, they're sinking. They're performing badly. They're not what they once were as a group, going back to last season, the year before. That they are sinking. And Steve Kerr's on the boat saying, okay, whatever happens, I'm going to sync with the veteran core. I'm going to sync with them too. I'm going to be there. Instead of a good leader, a good coach in that situation, navigating, would say, no, hang on a second. I'm actually going to lead this team in a different direction, take a different path. And even if that path is unknown, that direction is unknown, it's going to be better than sinking. And so in this whole kind of metaphor, it's the different direction, the different path in that situation is Moses Moody. You don't know necessarily what Moses Moody is going to do in the last 3 or 4 minutes of that game. You don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to stand up, if he's going to be able to hit big shots. There's far less data on that than there is Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins and everyone else in terms of the veteran core that closed that game. Steve went to what he knows and what he trusts. But at some point, you need to open yourself up. And I've said, going back to preseason, that if this team wants to win an NBA championship, then they need something different. They need something out of the box. They need Moody or Kuminga, specifically looking at those two players. They need one of those two guys to become, at minimum, a top 5 player on the team, I think. And you know what? Kuminga goes out, averages the second most points in the league across preseason. That looked like, I was having conversations could Kuminga by the end of the season be a top 3 or 4 player on this team? I was having those conversations, and other Warrior fans were having those conversations. Now Kuminga, somewhat by his own accord, because he played horrifically yesterday and hasn't been great, of recent times. So he's kind of out of the conversation. But Moody, I mean, at the very least, he should have been closing that game. And yet Steve doesn't want to open up, doesn't want to take a different approach, a different path. That may be a risk. Yes, it might be a risk. But it was a risk that needed to be taken. It was a risk that was deserved, given how Moody was playing at that point. And yet, he still thinks, all right, if this veteran core is going to sink, I'm sinking with them. And so Steve Kerr is out of contract at the moment. If I'm Joe Lacob, I'm having a really hard think about what I'm doing. I was having a conversation with a mate after the game yesterday. He said that Kerr might have to go. He's going to get the season. He's going to see out his contract. He is. But if the Warriors don't make the playoffs, I wouldn't be against not re-signing him. Because the way that he's been coaching so far this season, some of the decisions we've seen, it would be a risk to give him, especially with what coaches are getting at the moment. We saw Greg Popovich, and rightly so, 20-plus year legendary, arguably the greatest coach of all time in San Antonio. Monty Williams, how's that going in Detroit? How's that, 6-year, $78 million deal or whatever going for them in Detroit? Possibly at the worst point their franchise has ever been at. And very little positives to take. They've lost 14, 15 games in a row now. 2 wins on the season. Just ask Detroit how they're going and how happy they are with giving Monty Williams a 6-year, $78 million deal. And for the Warriors to re-sign Steve Kerr, they might need to give a similar number. They'd probably give maybe 4 or 5 years, $70 million as the Apple Watch goes off again. They're going to have to give out a lot of money to Steve Kerr. And just like every player in the league, you should be based on your current value, on how you're performing. Right now, you're really going to be handing Steve Kerr 5 years, $70 million. 6 years, $80 million. Are you going to be doing that? Would be a huge overpay. And so I just keep thinking, the more this goes on with the whole Moody Kuminga situation, 2 lottery picks that are now in their 3rd years, I really wonder where their careers would be at with a different coach. And I honestly think it's not necessarily about, people saying, oh, well, they came straight into a championship contending team, so of course they were going to get less opportunity. That is a case for sure. But I don't think it's necessarily the championship contending nature of it. I think it's the actual head coach and his inability to provide consistent opportunity. I have no idea how Moses Moody can stay ready like he does, can stay confident in his own game like he does with how he's treated from Steve Kerr. It is amazing, really. And would you actually blame Moses Moody? It'd be really odd, but it's an odd situation. Would you really blame him if he just requested a trade before the trade deadline? Said, I just don't want to be here anymore. Because me, personally, I wouldn't blame the guy. What more do you want him to do? 11 points, played some pretty good defense, and then just gets taken out when he's at the hottest point of his whole career. Oh, I'm honestly, I'm lost for words with how to describe how frustrating and how angry I was at the Moody treatment yesterday. And it'd be okay if it was the first time and he just buggered up once and we can say, okay, Steve got that wrong, let's move on. No, but it's not the case. This has been a thing for almost Moody's whole career, at least from the start of last season, where he comes in and out, is inconsistent playing time. Whenever he plays, he seemingly plays pretty well. And yet, nothing changes. Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so 50% for Steve Kerr, and there's a big watch there going forward. 20% to Steph. So, he has 28 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists. Good numbers, I suppose, in the box score. the turnover in the final minute was just horrific. So Fox goes 1 of 2 with the line. You're up 4 with possession with less than 50 seconds to go. You just need to find a way to win that game. And if you just play solid basketball, you don't even have to score on the next. If you just take 24 seconds off the shot clock, and now there's 25 seconds remaining, and you take a shot and you miss, well, guess what? You're still up 4. They've still got to score. There's now less than 25 seconds to go. You don't even have to score in that situation. Just use up the clock. And then they're going to have to play the foul game, and Steph's a great free throw shooter. Clay's a great free throw shooter. Like, you win the game. Only an absolute nightmare in that situation was going to lose the Warriors the game. And, of course, Steph gets a little bit of pressure and just throws the ball straight to Malik Monk, who truly hits the 3. Like, just dumb. And this is, unfortunately, what Steph has become a little bit. And he's now averaging 3.8 turnovers this season so far, which is the equal highest of his career. I thought the whole point of bringing Chris Paul in was to get Steph off the ball a bit more, which theoretically, less usage, less turnovers. But no, he's averaging a career high for turnovers. So, yes, CP obviously out for the last 3 quarters of that game, and that obviously hurt. The fact that I thought in that situation with Chris not on the floor next to Steph, the fact that you could double team from a Kings perspective, the fact you could double team, trap Steph, get the ball out of his hands, and then the decision maker like the Wiggins and the Loonies having to make decisions going downhill, that's obviously not as ideal as if you could get the ball back into Chris Paul's hands, or you could just start the possession in Chris Paul's hands and have Steph off ball a lot more, preventing the opportunity for Sacramento to trap or whatever else. So the CP3 thing did hurt, no doubt. But this is now 11 turnovers in the last 2 games from Steph, and some of them are just... It's like, I mean, there's a little bit of pressure, obviously, on that one in the final minute yesterday. There was. But it's almost unforgivable to turn the ball over in that manner, in that situation. Just find a different avenue. Find a way to just hold on to the ball for 24. I don't care if you give up a 24-second shot clock violation and turn the ball over that way. That again, you're still up 4 with 25 seconds to go. Other team still needs to score and then play the foul game. Like, to just let Sacramento back into the game like that, horrible. I thought some of his decision making in the second half when he was getting double teamed was actually like okay. And maybe, you know, it was up to a few of the other Warrior players to try and make more plays and take advantage of that a bit better than what they ultimately did. But yeah, that turnover, I don't know. The final possession. So, and this is again going back to the mismanagement of the timeouts from Steve. So Monk scores, tough shot over Wiggs. There's 7 seconds. Warriors have to go the other end of the floor. They get left with a Steph heave from well beyond the 3-point line. If you look at the replay, that Clay is wide open, and I mean wide open, on the right wing, with no defender anywhere close to him. Might as well have been on the practice floor by himself. And Clay's kind of yelling for the ball, and Steph throws it up. I'm a little bit less critical of that than what others have been on social media. Just because I think the clip I've seen, I'm not sure actually how much time was left. So I don't know how much time there was for Steph to pass to Clay and then Clay get a shot up, and whether that was even viable. But again, maybe he should have passed to Clay in that situation. Instead, he takes a tough, contested, heaving 3, leaves it short. So you could say he made the wrong decision there. Again, I'm going to be less critical than others of that. But yeah, Steph gets 20%, almost purely off that turnover alone. Because in that situation, you just have to look after the ball. As I said, you didn't even have to score on that possession. Just take a 24-second shot clock violation, or just shoot the ball at the shot clock buzzer. Anyway, I'm gonna give Draymond 10%. So sometimes feels like the Warriors are playing the opposition team and the refs sometimes, which is an incredibly tough hill to try and climb up when you're playing against both. And it kind of felt that way a little bit in the second half. The Kings shot over 40 free throws. They had 20 free throws alone in the third quarter. God, it was a tough watch in the second half. Not only because the Kings were coming back from a Warrior perspective, but because the constant whistles and the stop-start nature of the game. I thought the refereeing was atrocious. It really was. A lot of foul calls, and then some they just didn't call, like the Looney dunk attempt that he missed, that he got hacked on the arm or the hand, and they were just like, nah, play on. I tweeted that out. I don't know how you can call a gazillion fouls over the course of the game and yet miss that one. Whatever. But the whole point to me here is that why are the refs often, why do we often feel like the Warriors are playing the opposition team and the refs? And I think it's largely because of Draymond. And I want to give you an example here, and I'm not trying to compare me playing sport to professional NBA standards. But I honestly think that referees subconsciously will have a bias to one player or one team or another based on that game specifically. So I'll give you an example, and again, this is comparing social sport to professional sport, but I still think it kind of aligns a little bit. I play social Australian rules football, right? Not even club level, like it's social sport. We play on a Friday night at the moment. I've had times so far this season, and again, it's social sport, but I'm super competitive. I'm just a super competitive person, particularly when I'm playing sport. I want to win every single game that I play, regardless of what is on the line, which is absolutely nothing is on the line, apart from your own self-gratitude or whatever. Like, there is nothing on the line, but I'm competitive. I want to win, which is the same as a lot of men my age. And so there have been times this season where I'm playing where the refereeing, or we call umpiring, has been atrocious. And there's been some shocking decisions made. And it's only social sport, and it kind of sucks for me to say this and to acknowledge, and it's probably something I need to work on, but I will have a crack at the umpires and just let them know that was an atrocious decision. Or at least go up to them and ask why they made that decision and have a conversation with them, which I think is what Draymond does a lot as well. And I can guarantee you that once I start entering into conversation or dialogue with the umpires, that for the rest of that game, I feel like I am being harmed, I suppose, or the umpiring decisions are favouring the other team because of the exchange or the discussion that I've started with the umpire. The opposite happened last week, where we played and the other team started kind of getting into the umpiring, or the umpire a little bit, and questioning his decisions. And I felt like the other way. I felt like from that point, my team was being favoured because of it. And so I think it happens in all levels of sport, in any sport, is that umpires, referees will build a bias, a subconscious bias, because their decisions are being questioned by a team or one of those team's players, and therefore they subconsciously go against that player a little bit. Now, I think Draymond, in some instances, has been fortunate that he's probably allowed to get away with a lot more in terms of conversation and dialogue and getting into the referees than what others have. And I think there's a lot of opposition fans that are oftentimes disappointed with the fact that, one of their players can say one word to the ref and they get a technical, and then Draymond can kind of go at the ref over and over, and he kind of gets away with it. I think after this whole Gobert, obviously, it was, yesterday was the first game that Dre was back. I think that there might be a new directive here where there's going to be no BS. Absolutely no BS from Draymond, and as soon as there is, it's a T. And the technical he got yesterday, where he was complaining about a potential carry call that wasn't called, that's a weak technical foul. That was not deserved, in my opinion, at all. I thought it was a horrible call. And in a game where the Warriors lose by 1, it was pivotal. But I think it might prove the change in philosophy here from referees that we're just not going to take any of Draymond's BS. We're just not. And so I also think that just builds a subconscious understanding and bias against the Warriors at times. And especially in a rival building at Golden One Center. Malik Monk said after the game, that technical foul was the moment for us where we felt like we could complete this comeback and get even more aggressive with what we were doing out there. And so Draymond just, 1, gave them a point, which ended up being crucial. 2, I think, caused maybe more of a subconscious bias in the referees. And refereeing is an incredibly tough job. I would never do it. I would hate it. They also need to be held accountable at times. But I think the reality is that I think there is some bias. And I think we've just got to acknowledge that. And so to be on the good side of that bias more often than not, you just need to be in the referee's good books, really. You just do. And I think some players do that well. I think some teams do that well, and others don't. And the Warriors, I don't think, do that particularly well. So there's that, and then there's also the Monk basically acknowledging after the game that, hey, that was the moment where we really felt like we had all the momentum and that we could complete that comeback. So that's 3 things, really. It's the point, it's the refereeing bias or whatever, and it's the Monk acknowledging. So 3 different things there. Just from that play alone, Draymond played okay outside of that. Hit a couple of threes in the first half. Solid enough comeback. But it was, again, just a needless thing, I suppose. Turns into a big thing for the state of the game. I'm also going to give 10% to Clay. Good first half, 17 points. Some of his defense yesterday was actually pretty good. He blocked Monk at the rim once or twice. But 1 of 5 in the second half. And he had maybe one of the dumbest plays of this. In fact, I don't even know if you can call it one of the dumbest plays of the season. I don't even know if you can call it one of the dumbest plays of the game, because there were so many dumb plays down the stretch. Kings try and execute a 2-for-1 at the end of the third quarter. Warriors miss their first shot. Moses is out there, gets the offensive rebound, kicks it out to Clay. Clay gets it, there's 14 seconds on the shot clock. Do you not just dribble the ball out and take the last shot of the quarter? That's what 99% of players would do in that scenario. That is what 99% of fans would want you to do in that scenario. Instead, Clay gets the ball from Moses and just puts up a catch and shoot 3, which misses. Kings have a chance in transition. Fox gets to the line. Fox makes 1 out of 2 free throws. Guess what? Kings win the game by 1. It's just these decision making, and you can't get things right 100% of the time. I get that. The shot selection stuff with Clay, he's always going to have a few every game that you cringe at and you think, oh, why is he taking that shot? And you know what? Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. But there's just some things that 100% what the right decision is. And in that moment, the right decision was to hold on to the ball, give it back to Steph, who was in the game at that point, and take the final shot of the quarter. There is no doubt that was the thing to do. And that is the thing that 99% of players would have done in that scenario. And instead, Clay jacks up a three. And it wasn't the worst look. It was an okay look. Okay, I get it. Whatever. But there's still, you shot it with 13 seconds on the shot clock. You could have dribbled out for the last shot. And so again, that just encapsulates Clay's issues. The decision making, the shot selection. I don't know. I think some of the stuff with him is going a little bit overboard. There's obviously the concerning report from Kendra Andrews yesterday on ESPN, basically just stating that, well, emphatically stating that the contract scenario situation is weighing on him at the moment. And I think that's just, it's obviously the whole season it's been a case of Clay trying to prove to himself and to everyone else that he can get back to an all-star level, and that obviously getting back to an all-star level will garner him a big new deal from the Warriors or in free agency or whatever else. And unfortunately, I think we just haven't reached a point yet where Clay is willing to accept anything less than that, and that he, who he is as a player right now, which is a very good catch and shoot threat who can still give you 15, 20 points, who can provide some solid-ish defense. But yeah, ultimately hasn't quite got to that point. I thought yesterday's game was pretty good. He took 14 shots, 20 points on 14 shots. That's good. That's fine. If he just plays that game again for the rest of the season, that's fine. But don't have like the BS decision making at the end of the third quarter where you take a shot rather than dribbling out and taking the last shot of the quarter. It's just he always has like one or two of these a game. It's just, can you just cut them out? I'm willing to live with some dodgy shot selection. I'm willing to live with that. With a few shots a game where maybe you shouldn't be taking them, but like whatever. I'm willing to do that. But in that scenario, right, that wasn't the time to take a shot. So yeah. So 50 to Steve, 20 to Steph, 10 to Draymond and Clay each. And then I'll just say 10% to bad luck. And that goes down to the CP3 and the GP2 injuries, which are a major concern now going forward. Chris just left the game after the end of the first quarter. They're calling it leg soreness or whatever else. GP2, that looked bad in the third quarter. There was some speculation, which was like, is that an Achilles tear or something like that? Because he was kind of back of the knee kind of thing, high up on the calf region, and it was pretty innocuous, which is always a worry when there's kind of like he wasn't even sprinting or anything like that. Obviously wasn't a contact injury. Sounds like the Warriors are saying it's just a calf issue, which, I mean, just a calf issue is me saying that, well, that's better than a torn Achilles. But that could still sideline him for quite a few weeks here, I would suggest. And he was obviously offering something and providing something to the Warriors since his return. That was his second or third game back from another injury. So it's been a frustrating time for GP2, given what he went through last season. It's really disappointing because obviously he's one of the most loved players on the team, and he's been fantastic for Golden State. So it's very disappointing. He's going to be a big loss, and CP3 as well. We'll see what happens with him. There's no doubt the Warriors missed both those players in the fourth quarter yesterday, and if one or both of them are available to play in that final period, the Warriors probably win that game. I think Chris Paul in that final minute, that's part of the reason you got him in the game, you got him on the team in the offseason, was to try and manage those end game scenarios, and it's not one the Warriors were able to manage yesterday. Things might have been different if Chris Paul was available. A lot of negatives there. 39 minutes in, just a few positives, I suppose. It's hard to really go back to because at the forefront of your mind is the second half collapse. The first half was probably the best basketball the Warriors played all season. And to add some kind of perspective to this, if you go in to Sacramento against a very good team and you lose by a point, if you just say that at the start of the game, if you just say, "Oh, look, we lost by a point. Great, good game, close game. Referees were not great. Probably cost us a little bit. Good fight, whatever." Like, if you just say that at the start of the game, then you probably walk away as a fan thinking, okay, like, not too bad. Lose by a point against a good team. Obviously very disappointing, but whatever. The final result yesterday was, wow, that was an absolute disaster, losing by a point. Because of the manner in which it happened. Because of the manner in building a 24-point lead in the second quarter and then having that completely evaporate. So, very disappointing. But, yes, you can look back to the first half, which was probably the best half of Warriors basketball this season. Wiggins has 18, Clay has 17, Steph has 16, 5 and 8, or 16, 8 and 5 or something like that. Puts up big numbers in the first half. Warriors put up 72 as a team. That was probably their best half. It was their best half of the season. They were up 24 against a very good team on their own 4. And at that point, the Warriors looked like they were going to continue their domination and their supremacy over the Kings. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. They shot 41.5% from three-point range, 48.2% from the floor. They're now 2-3 in their last 5 games, but I will say the shooting numbers over that 5-game stretch have been excellent. They've been about 42% from 3 over the last 5 games, and that includes a bad shooting night in Phoenix. So I have been happy, I suppose, or I've got some optimism, I guess, moving forward with the fact that their shooting numbers are on the way up, given where they started at, which was a real struggle to begin the season. Even when they started 5-1, some of their shooting numbers weren't great. Obviously, CP, Wiggins, Clay, JK all struggling from beyond the arc at that point, and CP's come along and Wiggs has come along. So that was, that's a positive, I suppose. And Wiggins, I guess, 29 points, 10 rebounds. The way he was being able to score in a multitude of ways, hitting a couple of threes. His mid-range shot is kind of really coming along at the moment, and almost, I'm not going to say automatic, but he's a lot more confident in that than what he was, and the results are starting to show. He hit 5 of 6 free throws, which was a huge bonus almost, because we know he struggles at the free throw line so far this season. He was able to take advantage of some post-up opportunities against smaller guards. So the way he was able to score in a multitude of ways is kind of what the Warriors really need on a consistent basis. So there's not that over-reliance on Steph. And for Wiggs to be more than a catch-and-shoot threat, I think is really important. So that was nice to see. That was obviously a huge positive. Just a disappointment that he's had 2 very good games this season. Like he's had 2 very good games, and the rest have been pretty average to below average, to bad at times. So it's 2 very good games, 2 great games of the season, and the Warriors have lost both. So that's just disappointing, really, because at the moment, I'm still not at a point where I go into games knowing what I'm going to get from Wiggs, and that's the disappointing thing at the moment is that he could come out and he's shown again that he's capable of having those 29, 30-point games, but he's also shown more than shown a capability of scoring 10 points. So, unfortunately, the consistency isn't there. But, again, he's shown that he's capable, so that's a start. Saric and Moody were good off the bench. The Moody thing, I could talk about it nauseam, but I won't. So, Warriors 8-10 on the season. Now they've got a matchup with the Clippers, I think, on Thursday night, which is going to be a real battle because, the Clippers are in about as bad a situation, if not a worse situation, than the Warriors with the whole James Harden thing, and they are really struggling at the moment themselves. So the Warriors are probably going slight favourites with that one, but again, I'm assuming CP and GPT will both be out, so that hurts. Obviously, whenever you come up against Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, you're going to expect that it's going to be a tough game, and the Clippers are going to be more than capable of beating the Warriors. In saying that, as I said, the Warriors will probably go in as slight favourites. So, thank you for everyone. A bit of a ranting episode, I suppose, for 45 minutes. A lot of negativity, but it's hard not to do that after what we saw in the second half yesterday in what I said at the start of the episode, people stating, one of the worst regular season losses from the Warriors in the last 10 years. So disappointing. I don't really care too much about the elimination from the in-season tournament. If anything, it's actually positive. Now they get to play Portland next week at home, which you can almost, I mean, there's not too many guaranteed wins for the Warriors right now, but a home game against the Trailblazers is probably quite up there in terms of as close to a guaranteed win as you could get. The other game is going to be against Oklahoma against the Thunder in Oklahoma City next Friday. That'll be a tough matchup. That'll be the fourth time those two teams have played so far this season, which is crazy. The first three have all gone to the road team, so hopefully that continues in the fourth one. Other than that, guys, we'll finish it up. Again, thank you if you've got through to this point. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can find me at POC252 on Twitter. That's POK252. Other than that, I'll see you on the next episode.